The employee cafeteria buzzed with energy. Laughter, the clinking of cutlery, and snippets of conversations filled the air. Ryan sat at a corner table, a sandwich in one hand and his phone in the other. Before we dive deeper into today's story, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me continue sharing stories that inspire and touch your day. It was his usual lunchtime routine, scrolling through emails while attempting to ignore the lively chaos around him. "Ryan, man, I need a favor." Ryan glanced up to see Kevin, his closest friend at work, standing across the table. Kevin's tone was urgent, his expression somewhere between desperation and guilt. "Let me guess," Ryan said with a smirk, setting his phone down. "Do you need me to cover your shift again because you forgot to send in your PTO request?" "Worst," Kevin muttered, dropping into the chair opposite him. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "All right, what's going on?" Kevin hesitated, leaning forward as if about to confess to a crime. "Okay, so you know the company next door, right? The one we do projects with sometimes." Ryan nodded, taking another bite of his sandwich. "Yeah, what about it?" "Well," Kevin began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There's this girl who works there, Megan. Have you heard of her?" Ryan frowned. "I don't think so." "Why?" Kevin exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "People say she's, well, not the most attractive, like at all." Ryan's expression hardened. "Kevin, what's your point? This sounds pretty shallow." I know, Kevin said quickly, raising his hands defensively. "Just hear me out." "So last week, a few of the guys were giving me a hard time about being superficial, saying I'd never go out with someone unless they looked like a supermodel." Ryan sighed, already dreading where this was going, and Kevin continued, his voice growing quieter to shut them up. "I might have said that I was going to take Megan out on a date." Ryan froze mid-chew, his eyes narrowing. "You what?" "I know it was stupid," Kevin groaned, burying his face in his hands. "But they wouldn't stop, and I just blurted it out. Now they're all waiting to see if I'll actually do it." Ryan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "So let me get this straight. Did you make up a fake date with a girl you barely know just to impress the guys?" "Yes," Kevin admitted miserably. "And now you don't want to go through with it because it's going to be awkward," Kevin exclaimed. "I mean, what do I even say to her? What if she's upset when she realizes I only asked her out to prove a point? It's a no-win situation." Ryan shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "Kevin, you do realize how messed up this is, right? You're playing with someone's feelings. That's why I need your help," Kevin said, desperation creeping into his voice. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "What kind of help are we talking about here?" Kevin hesitated, then blurted out, "I need you to go in my place for a moment." Ryan thought he misheard. "Excuse me. You go instead of me," Kevin explained hurriedly. "Megan doesn't know me that well. She probably won't even realize it's not me. You're better at this kind of thing anyway. You could charm her, make small talk, whatever. Just get me out of this mess." Ryan stared at him, incredulous. "What's your solution? You want me to pretend to be you and go on this date?" "Exactly," Kevin said, his face lighting up. "It's perfect. She gets a nice evening, and I avoid making a fool of myself. Win-win." Ryan shook his head, his irritation growing. "This is a terrible idea, Kevin. It's dishonest, and it's unfair to Megan. She deserves better than to be part of some ridiculous bet." "I know," Kevin said, his voice quieter now. "But what am I supposed to do if I stand her up? That's even worse. At least if you go, she won't feel like I bailed on her." Ryan groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're unbelievable. You know that." "Please, Ryan," Kevin pleaded. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. You're my only hope here." Ryan hesitated, torn between his instincts and Kevin's pitiful expression. He hated the idea of deceiving someone, especially for a shallow reason like this. But Kevin had a point. Standing Megan up would be cruel. "Fine," Ryan said reluctantly. His voice was heavy with resignation. "I'll do it, but only because I don't want Megan to feel hurt or humiliated." Kevin's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, man. You're a lifesaver." "Don't thank me yet," Ryan muttered, his tone laced with annoyance. "This whole thing could still blow up in your face." "It won't," Kevin said confidently. "You've got this. Just be your usual charming self." As Kevin left the table, A wave of unease settled over Ryan. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake, but it was too late to back out now. Just one evening, he told himself, be polite, be respectful, and make sure Megan has a good time. Then it's over. But deep down, Ryan couldn't ignore the nagging sense that this wasn't going to go as smoothly as Kevin imagined. Ryan sat on the edge of his couch, staring blankly at the television. The screen flickered with the opening credits of a movie he'd been meaning to watch, but his mind was miles away. He tapped his fingers restlessly against his knee, replaying the events of the day in his head. What did I get myself into? He thought for the 100th time. The idea of going on this date, pretending to be Kevin, felt wrong on so many levels. No matter how much he tried to justify it by telling himself he was doing it to spare Megan's feelings, a voice in the back of his mind kept whispering that he was complicit in a lie. With a heavy sigh, he pushed himself off the couch and headed to his closet. If he was going to do this, he figured he might, as well as make an effort to look presentable. He pulled out a crisp white button-down shirt and a pair of dark slacks, laying them neatly on his bed as he reached for a tie. He paused, catching his reflection in the mirror. For a moment, he imagined the face Megan might make when she realized she'd been tricked not just by Kevin, but by him as well. The thought made his stomach churn. Ryan sat down on the bed, running a hand through his hair. He couldn't stop the unkind words he'd overheard about Megan from echoing in his mind, the light jokes, the cruel nicknames, the way people treated her as if she were invisible. How bad could it be? He wondered, trying to push away his anxiety. But even that thought felt wrong. Megan wasn't a problem to tolerate. She was a person, and she deserved better than to be treated like some experiment to prove Kevin's point. The next day at lunch, Ryan's colleagues were quick to notice his distracted demeanor. "Oh, Romeo," one of them said, smirking. "Ready for your big night?" Ryan glanced up from his salad, his frown deepening. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb." Another chimed in, leaning across the table. "We all heard about the date." "I mean, Megan, really? I didn't think you had it in you." A ripple of laughter went around the table, but Ryan didn't join in. Instead, he set down his fork and gave them a pointed look. "It's just dinner," he said flatly. "No need to make it a big deal. Just dinner." One of them repeated mockingly. "We'll see if you're still saying that after tonight." Ryan gritted his teeth, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the conversation. "Enough!" Sophia, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, folded her arms and glared at the group. "You guys need to grow up. Megan hasn't done anything to deserve this kind of treatment." The laughter died instantly, and the group exchanged sheepish glances. Sophia turned her gaze to Ryan. "And you?" she said, her tone softer but firm. "I hope you're not just going along with this for a laugh. Megan's been through enough without someone else treating her like a joke." Ryan opened his mouth to defend himself, but stopped short. Sophia's words hit uncomfortably close to home, forcing him to confront the reality of what he was about to do. "I'm not," he said finally, his voice quieter. "I'm just trying to do the right thing." Sophia studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good, because she deserves that much." That evening, Ryan stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the color of his shirt for the third time. He felt a mixture of nerves and guilt, unsure if he was ready for what lay ahead. Just be polite, he told himself, staring at his reflection. Be kind and make sure she has a good time. That's all that matters. But as he grabbed his jacket and headed out the door, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night was going to be far more complicated than he anticipated. Ryan sat at a small, neatly set table in the corner of the restaurant, the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of cutlery around him doing little to ease his nerves. His knee bounced anxiously under the table as he checked the time on his watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. "What am I even doing here?" he thought, rubbing his temples. The entire situation felt surreal, and no matter how he tried to justify his presence, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was walking into a disaster. He looked around the restaurant, his eyes darting to the door every time it opened. Each time it wasn't her, and he felt a mixture of relief and dread. Part of him hoped Megan wouldn't show up. Then he wouldn't have to follow through with Kevin's harebrained scheme. But another part of him, the part that Sophia's words had reached, knew that if she didn't come, it would hurt her far more than she deserved. Ryan sighed and picked up the menu, skimming it without really reading. His mind kept drifting back to the stories he'd heard about Megan, the cruel jokes, the whispers behind her back. He hated himself for having let those words influence him. The door chimed again, and Ryan glanced up, prepared to dismiss. Whoever walked in is just another customer. But this time he froze. She was here. Megan stepped into the restaurant. Her posture is straight. Her movements were deliberate. She wore a sleek navy dress that complemented her figure without being overly showy. Her hair was styled into soft waves that framed her face, and a touch of makeup highlighted her sharp features. She looked stunning. Ryan's mouth went dry for a moment. He couldn't reconcile the woman in front of him with the image he'd built in his mind from Kevin. Stories. This is Megan. As she scanned the room, her eyes landed on him, and a polite smile curved her lips. She walked toward him with an air of quiet confidence that only added to her presence. "Hi," she said warmly when she reached the table. "You must be Kevin." Ryan blinked, snapping out of his daze. "Yeah, hi, Megan, right?" "That's me," she said, taking the seat across from him. "Sorry if I kept you waiting. Parking was a nightmare." No, you're fine," Ryan said quickly, feeling suddenly self-conscious as the server came by to take their drink orders. Ryan tried to compose himself. Megan was nothing like he had imagined, not just in appearance, but in demeanor. She exuded poise and intelligence, and her easy smile put him at ease despite his initial nervousness. "So," Megan said once their drinks arrived, leaning slightly forward. "Kevin, tell me about yourself." Ryan hesitated. His mind is racing. He realized he hadn't prepared much beyond agreeing to go on the date. What was he supposed to say? "Well, I work in marketing." He began cautiously, sticking to generalities to avoid tripping up. "It's challenging sometimes, but I like it." Megan nodded, her eyes attentive. Marketing is a tough field. Creativity and strategy all rolled into one. "Do you enjoy the creative side more, or the analytical?" Ryan was caught off guard by her thoughtful question, but quickly recovered. "Definitely the creative side. I like coming up with new ideas and trying to think outside the box." Megan smiled. "That's great. I've always admired creative thinkers." As the conversation continued, Ryan found himself relaxing. Megan was not only engaging, but also remarkably quick-witted. She shared stories from her own job in graphic design, describing the satisfaction of seeing her work come to life in campaigns and publications. "What about outside of work?" Ryan asked, genuinely curious now. "Any hobbies?" Megan's face lit up. "Too many," she admitted with a laugh. "I love photography. It's how I unwind. There's something therapeutic about capturing a moment and framing it in your own way. And I volunteer at a local art program for kids on weekends. It's chaotic, but seeing their creativity makes it worth it." Ryan was impressed. "That sounds amazing. You must be pretty passionate about what you do." "I am," Megan said simply. "Life's too short not to do what you love." Her words resonated with Ryan more than he expected. The ease of their conversation, the sincerity in her voice. It all felt so far removed from the shallow stories Kevin had told. As the evening went on, Ryan found himself forgetting the purpose of his being there. The guilt that had weighed on him earlier seemed to fade as he became genuinely captivated by Megan's charm and depth. When the server brought the check, Ryan realized with a start that nearly 2 hours had passed. "I can't believe how fast the time flew," he said, smiling. Megan returned his smile, her eyes warm. "That's always a good sign." As they stood to leave, Ryan felt a strange mix of emotions: relief that the evening had gone well, shame for the lie he was living, and a growing admiration for the woman he had just spent the past 2 hours with. As Megan walked ahead of him toward the exit, Ryan couldn't help but think Kevin had no idea what he was missing. And honestly, neither did I. As they walked side by side down the quiet street outside the restaurant, the warm glow of the lampposts reflected off the pavement. Ryan found himself glancing at Megan, his curiosity growing with every passing minute. She had surprised him in so many ways during dinner, but he sensed there was more to her story, something unspoken that gave her an air of quiet strength. So he began, breaking the comfortable silence. "You mentioned during dinner that you volunteer with kids. How did you get into that?" Megan smiled softly, her eyes lighting up. "It started a couple of years ago. I'd always loved art, but I never thought of teaching it until a friend invited me to a weekend program at a local community center. Seeing the kids dive into their projects without overthinking, without worrying about being judged, reminded me of why I fell in love with creating in the first place. That's incredible, Ryan said sincerely. You must have a lot of patience to work with kids. They keep me on my toes, Megan admitted with a laugh. But they're worth it. I've learned as much from them as they've learned from me. Ryan smiled, impressed by her humility and passion. It sounds like you found something that really matters to you. I have, Megan said simply, her expression growing thoughtful. But it wasn't always like that. For a long time, I let other people's opinions define how I saw myself. It took a while to get to where I am now. Ryan hesitated, sensing the shift in tone. If you don't mind me asking, he said carefully. What do you mean by that? Megan paused, her gaze fixed on the pavement for a moment before looking back at him. I'm guessing you've heard some of the things people say about me, she said matter-of-factly. Ryan's stomach sank. He wasn't sure how to respond, but Megan didn't seem upset. If anything, she seemed resigned. Yeah, she continued, her voice calm but firm. I know what people think. I've heard the whispers, the jokes. At first, it really hurt. I used to struggle with self-acceptance, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. She touched her temple lightly, where Ryan now noticed a faint scar partially hidden by her hair. This, she said, catching his gaze. It's from a car accident when I was 21. I was lucky to survive, but I ended up with a few scars. Nothing too major, but apparently enough to make me stand out. Ryan felt a pang of guilt as he listened, remembering the cruel stories Kevin and others had spread. That must have been so difficult, he said softly. It was, Megan admitted, especially at work. People can be cruel without even realizing it. The way they look at me, the things they'd say when they thought I wasn't listening. It made me feel like I was less than human. Her voice softened, but her eyes remained steady. But then I realized something. No matter how much I tried to change myself, it was never going to be enough for some people. So I stopped trying. I started focusing on what made me happy and growing as a person, instead of trying to fit into their mold. Ryan was struck by the calm strength in her words. That takes a lot of courage, he said, his voice full of admiration. Megan shrugged lightly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe, or maybe I just got tired of living for everyone else. Either way, I'm a lot happier now. As they continued walking, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about everything Megan had just shared. He had walked into this evening expecting to meet someone timid and insecure, but instead, he had found a woman who was unapologetically herself, a woman who had faced incredible challenges and come out stronger on the other side. I have to say, Ryan said after a moment, you're probably one of the most grounded people I've ever met. The way you've handled everything. It's inspiring. Megan gave him a sidelong glance, her smile softening. Thanks, Kevin. That means a lot. And I mean it, Ryan continued. You've been through so much. And instead of letting it break you, you turned it into something positive. That's rare. Megan laughed lightly. Well, I've had plenty of practice. Life is a way of teaching you the hard lessons, whether you're ready or not. Ryan nodded his admiration for her, deepening with every word as they approached the corner where their paths would diverge. He realized he wasn't just impressed by Megan. He was genuinely drawn to her. Her strength, her resilience, and her authenticity had completely shattered the shallow image he built from other people's stories. When they stopped, Megan turned to him, her expression warm but curious. Thanks for tonight, Kevin. I had a really good time. Me too, Ryan said earnestly. More than I expected. Megan raised an eyebrow, a teasing glint in her eye. Oh, what were you expecting? Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. Let's just say I didn't expect to meet someone as incredible as you. Megan smiled, her cheeks faintly flushed. Well, I'm glad I could surprise you. They stopped at the corner where they would part ways. Ryan shoved his hands into his pockets, reluctant to let the night end. Thanks again for tonight, Megan said, her tone warm. Thank you, Ryan replied, his voice genuine. This was amazing. Megan studied him for a moment, her smile fading into something more contemplative. Then, to Ryan's surprise, she said it was. But before we go, there's something I need to say. Ryan tensed, caught off guard by her sudden seriousness. "What is it?" Megan tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I want to thank you for coming tonight, but I know you're not Kevin." The words hit Ryan like a thunderclap. His heart stopped, and for a moment he could only stare at her, his mind racing. "I what?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. Megan smiled faintly, though her eyes remained steady. "I knew from the beginning. Kevin and I have spoken before. Once or twice at events. Not enough to know him well, but enough to recognize that you're not him." Ryan's stomach dropped. The carefully constructed facade he'd maintained all evening crumbled in an instant. "Megan, actually my name is Ryan." "It's okay." Megan interrupted gently. "I didn't say anything because I wanted to see how you'd handle it. I wanted to know what kind of person you are." Ryan's face burned with shame. He felt exposed like a child caught in a lie. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with regret. "Kevin asked me to do this, and I didn't think it through. I didn't want you to feel stood up, but now I realize I just made things worse." Megan smiled and softened, though her gaze remained sharp. "Ryan, do you know why people like Kevin don't bother me anymore?" Ryan shook his head, unsure how to respond. "Because their opinions don't matter," she said simply. "What matters is how people treat others and how they treat me. And tonight you treated me with respect. That's more than I can say for a lot of people." Her words, though kind, only deepened Ryan's guilt. He had walked into this evening with the wrong intentions, agreeing to a deceitful scheme. Yet Megan, the person most affected by it, was extending him a grace he didn't feel he deserved. "Megan, I don't even know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been an idiot. You deserve so much better than this." Megan regarded him quietly for a moment, then shrugged. "We all make mistakes, Ryan. What matters is what we learn from them." She adjusted her scarf and took a step back. "Good night, Ryan. Take care." As she walked away, Ryan stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing heavily on his chest. Megan wasn't angry, but her calm demeanor and the quiet strength in her parting gaze left an indelible mark. He felt a deep sense of shame, not just for deceiving her, but for having underestimated her in the first place. Megan was far more than he had imagined, and he had been too blind to see it until now. Long after she disappeared into the night, Ryan remained rooted to the spot, replaying the evening in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had let her down, not just Megan, but himself. Ryan couldn't shake the memory of Megan's calm, knowing gaze as she walked away that night. The more he thought about it, the heavier his guilt became. She had shown him grace and understanding, but he couldn't let things end like that. He needed to make things right, not just for her, but for himself. The next morning, Ryan sat at his desk, staring at his phone. His mind replayed the events of the previous evening, and with each replay, his frustration with Kevin grew. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his phone and called Kevin. "Hey man." Kevin answered cheerfully, oblivious to Ryan's simmering anger. "How'd it go? Did you survive?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "I need to talk to you now." Kevin hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Ryan's tone. "Okay, meet me in the break room." A few minutes later, Ryan found Kevin lounging in a chair, sipping coffee as if nothing was wrong. "So what's up?" Kevin asked, his tone casual. "What's up?" Ryan repeated, his voice low but sharp. "What's up is that you sent me on a date to cover for your stupidity, and you didn't think twice about how it might affect Megan or me, for that matter." Kevin frowned, setting his coffee down. "Who? Hold on. I thought you were cool with this." "I wasn't," Ryan snapped. "But you begged me. And like an idiot, I agreed. And you know what? Megan knew the whole time. She knew I wasn't you." Kevin's face paled slightly. "She knew?" "Yeah, she knew," Ryan said, his voice rising, "and she handled it with more class and dignity than either of us deserved. Meanwhile, you're sitting here acting like this is some kind of joke." Kevin's expression hardened. "Okay, look, I get it. Maybe it wasn't the best idea, but it's not like I hurt anyone." "You didn't?" Ryan asked incredulously. "You used her as a pawn in some stupid game to impress the guys. Do you even hear yourself right now?" Kevin opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, his gaze dropping to the table. "You know what, Kevin?" Ryan said, his voice quieter, but no less firm. I don't think I can do this anymore if you can't see what's wrong with what you did. Then we're not on the same page. Good luck with that. Ryan turned and walked away, leaving Kevin staring after him in stunned silence. Determined to make amends, Ryan began looking into ways he could connect with Megan again. He remembered her mentioning a few collaborative projects between their companies and decided to start there. After some digging, he discovered that Megan was part of a marketing team working on a product launch for a new app. Ryan wasted no time volunteering for his company's side of the project, even though it meant taking on extra work. He wanted to prove to Megan and himself that he was serious about making things right. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late nights. Ryan threw himself into the work not just to impress Megan, but because he genuinely wanted to contribute something meaningful. The day of the product launch arrived, and the event was a bustling hub of energy. The venue was filled with sleek displays, interactive kiosks, and excited attendees eager to see the new app in action. Ryan was stationed at one of the booths, explaining the app's features to a group of visitors. When he caught sight of her, Megan stood near the center of the room, holding a clipboard and talking to one of her team members. She looked as poised and confident as ever. Her focus is entirely on the event. Ryan hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should approach her, but then she turned her head and spotted him. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across the crowded room. Taking a deep breath, Ryan excused himself from the booth and made his way over to her. "Ryan," Megan said as he approached her, tone neutral but curious. "What are you doing here?" "I'm part of the team for my company," he explained. "I volunteered to help with the launch." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Really? That doesn't seem like your usual role." "It's not," Ryan admitted, "but I wanted to be here for the project and for you." Megan tilted her head slightly, studying him. "For me?" Ryan nodded, his expression earnest. "Megan, I've been thinking about what you said that night, about how people treat others. You were right. I wasn't fair to you or honest, but I want to change that. I want to prove that I'm better than the guy you met that night." Megan's gaze softened, though she didn't say anything immediately. "I know it's going to take more than words," Ryan continued. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to support the work you're doing because it matters. You matter." For a moment, Megan looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she smiled. "Well," she said, her voice warm, "you're off to a good start." Relief flooded Ryan's chest, and he returned her smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." Megan glanced around the bustling room, then back at him. "I appreciate the effort, Ryan. But remember, actions speak louder than words. Let's see if you can keep it up." "Deal," Ryan said, his smile widening as they turned back to their respective roles in the event. Ryan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just trying to make amends. He was learning to be the person he wanted to be. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. The product launch had been a resounding success. The energy in the venue had simmered down as attendees began to leave. But Ryan's heart still raced. He knew he couldn't let this moment pass without speaking to Megan. He found her near one of the displays, carefully packing up materials with her team. Taking a deep breath, he approached her. "Megan," he said softly, drawing her attention. She turned, her expression curious but calm. "Ryan? What is it?" Ryan hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet determination. "I owe you a real apology, not just for pretending to be Kevin that night, but for how I let myself get caught up in something so disrespectful. You didn't deserve any of that. And I'm sorry." Megan set the box she was holding down and crossed her arms, watching him carefully. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," Ryan continued, "but I've realized how shallow I was, how much I let other people's opinions guide me. In meeting you, that's changed everything. You've shown me what it means to have real strength, real integrity. I want to be someone worthy of your respect." Megan's gaze softened as his words sank in. "That's quite the speech," she said quietly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "But you know, Ryan, it's not about being perfect. It's about being honest. And you're finally being honest with me and yourself." She paused as if weighing her next words carefully. "I've seen the effort you've made over the past few weeks, and I can tell it's real. So maybe we can start fresh. See where this goes." Ryan's heart lifted at her words, his relief evident in the way his shoulders relaxed. "I like that," he said. His smile was genuine. "Thank you, Megan. I promise I won't take this chance for granted." In the months that followed, Ryan and Megan began working closely on collaborative projects between their companies. Their teamwork was seamless, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared goals. They challenged each other to think bigger, to push boundaries, and to create meaningful work that resonated with others outside of work. Their bond grew even deeper. Ryan admired Megan's passion and resilience, while Megan appreciated Ryan's willingness to grow and confront his flaws. Their differences complemented each other, and their similarities strengthened their connection. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly successful campaign, they sat together in a quiet corner of a cafe, reflecting on how far they'd come. "You know," Megan said, stirring her tea thoughtfully, "I never expected to meet someone like you through all of this." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Trust me, I never expected someone like you to give me a second chance." Megan smiled, her eyes warm. "Well, I guess we both learned something important. It's not where you start that matters. It's where you end up." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "And I'm glad we ended up here." Their story became one of growth, forgiveness, and connection. Together, they proved that true relationships are built not on perfection, but on the willingness to see and support each other through life's imperfections. As their lives intertwined, through work, laughter, and through love, they created a partnership that extended far beyond the walls of their respective companies. It was a partnership rooted in the understanding that true beauty lies in authenticity, and true love comes from seeing each other for who they really are. Megan and Ryan standing side by side at another collaborative event. Their smiles were bright in their eyes, filled with the quiet joy of a bond well-earned. They had found something rare and precious, a connection built not on appearances or expectations, but on the unshakable foundation of trust and understanding. As they looked toward the future, it was clear they had found not only success, but also the kind of happiness that only comes from truly knowing and appreciating another soul. As we close the chapter on Ryan and Megan's heartwarming journey, we're reminded that the best stories aren't about perfection, but about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to see beyond the surface. Their story teaches us that true beauty lies in authenticity, and that love thrives when built on trust and understanding. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Thank you for joining us on Ryan and Megan's incredible journey, a story of redemption, personal growth, and the power of authenticity. From a misguided act of deception to a deep and meaningful connection built on honesty, their story reminds us that true relationships are not about perfection, but about the willingness to grow, learn from our mistakes, and see each other for who we really are. Megan and Ryan's journey teaches us that love thrives on trust and mutual respect, and the most beautiful connections are those that allow us to be our true selves. If you found this story inspiring, please subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt journeys. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and like the video to help us grow our community of support and growth.